Hello, all my dear Poopmas. Today I got something extra special for y'all. Okay, that was just an intro for Lucy. In all seriousness, it's me, Alpha. If you don't know who I am, uh, right now I'm rank 4, but most of the time I'm chilling somewhere in the top 10, top 20 ladder. And I do free coaching, and I realized that in many of my coaching sessions, I'm talking through the same basic ideas, especially for newer players who are around, I don't know, somewhere between like 1800, 2K, 2.2 area, where there's a lot of similar problems or gaps in knowledge. So I thought I'd make a video and basically just do what I do in a coaching session, at least part of it. Um, some other things are obviously I can't do without a specific person, but hopefully these basic ideas are useful. And the first one I'm going to talk about once I load into Sandbox is we're going to go over just some basic ideas of splitting in Legion and the reason why splitting is important, especially in the early game. It matters in the late game too, but for the most part, the early game is the important one because you really need to be able to maximize all your units being able to tank early, which will let you greed harder in terms of pushing more and playing undervalue more, which will let you create advantages that snowball your economy and then therefore get to the late game. Pick Grove because it's very easy to show some stuff with Grove. So the first thing we're going to talk about is range splitting with a melee, which is very important because range units, they have HP pools. Like for example, let's start with Daphne. Like this has 1k HP, and if you really want to use that HP in the early game, so it's important for things to split tank. Let's go to wave 3, the first wave that matters. Obviously, Daphne holds wave 1, wave 2, no problem. Let's say it's wave 3, and we want to build a melee unit. We want them to split tank, share some aggro. So the important thing is looking at this range circle. Basically, anything inside the range circle means it'll tank for the Daphne, and the further away it is from the Daphne, obviously it means the less it'll tank. The closer it is, the more it'll tank, and so there are different degrees, and you can use this to try and figure out where you want your units. Generally, early game, like for example on wave 3 specifically, I'd be willing to put my units outside the circle of a unit with long range. Obviously, this changes depending on how long range the unit is, so different units will have different chosen splits. And an important thing is to go into Sandbox and practice these things for yourself, because it's one thing for you to see in a video, it's another thing to get the feel for what it looks like, what it looks like, and how it plays out in a real game. So, for example, we'll do the first column, third column. This is like the easiest way to split. We'll do like a normal send on wave 3. And I'll show you a couple different positions to give you an idea of what it can look like. So you can see my Daphne and my Welshram are going to split tank decently. My Daphne might be tanking a little too much considering it's tanking a lizard as well, but it kills off all the stuff hitting it, so it's not that bad. And maybe I hold, maybe I don't. I don't think it's a hold, but it's not bad. And obviously there's different degrees of variance, RNG, based on how the wave works. But I can show you. Like, let's say I want to put this Welshram a little closer inside on the very, very edge of the circle. And let's run it again. And I'm pretty sure my Daphne is going to tank way less now. So it's tanking like, maybe like 3 or 4 creeps of the hoppers. And obviously still tanking Blizzard. But this actually looks pretty reasonable as well. My Daphne is going to tank the lizard for the Welshram the whole time. It's a fold, so that's pretty nice. Obviously, depending on what the send is, this changes things as well. Well, I can't really change the send, so I guess I'll show something else first. But let's say we want to put this Welshram split tanking on the wall. I don't know. We could probably do here. Probably do here. I haven't really mess around with the wall too much, and Daphne specifically. Mostly because I don't play that much Daphne opener, but you can see this looks about the same. It's like 3-ish creeps plus the lizard, and it looks pretty good as well. I guess like an important thing is like the send difference again. Like if there is a lizard to tank, it's maybe nicer if my Daphne doesn't tank quite as much. If I get something like 3 snails, maybe I want my Daphne to tank a few more creeps because it can then. I'll try to show that right here. Uh, so another send you can get is 3 snails. And this is all assuming you get a 60 on 3, which isn't guaranteed, but it's an important threshold to practice with because that's roughly the benchmark of a send that could leak you, right? Wave 3, it's probably the most myth you'll get. You can be 5 workers, and that's what you'll have to hold against. You can see that my Wild Shrimp dies a lot before my Daphne uses up the HP pool. It's not quite perfect split tanking like we want, but looks like it's good enough. The Daphne cleans up everything. So maybe write this positioning down. And you can see that you can choose where to put the Wild Shrimp, first column, third column, depending on how you want it later in the game. Because, for example, a Wild Shrimp is more, does some decent damage, and maybe you want it to heal up a bit with its passive. So, like, if it's not a Wild Shrimp, maybe it's like a Wind Hawk or a Gate Guard or something that does damage. You want it maybe on the wall. That's not a real wave. And then if you have like a bigger unit later, you want it to tank a bit more, you put on the outside because let's say we'll show the wave 4 split. So basically, then after you build like this on wave 3, on come wave 4, you probably want to build either something third column to take a bit more aggro, or the easiest way to do is just add whatever tier 1 unit you have. Let's say I have Buzz. I don't know. Let's just. I'm not very good at picking the exact spot on early waves, but if you just need a split to split something, you can do something like that. This is not the highest value for 60 Sun on wave 4, but we'll see how it goes. As you can see, the Wild Shrimp is going to get basically pick up everything in the split. I got a little lucky with the Buzz passive, so I got to kill off the Lizard, which is pretty important. Obviously, I'm going to leak because I'm, like, I don't know, playing some amount of value under, but you can see the basic idea, which is that basically another way to buy some time, the creeps have to go right first, kill off a little shitter, and then come back to the main side. So this would be another reason why you want maybe your damage melee unit on the wall, and we put our big boy tanks like this antler over here, because then obviously I'm going to hold now, but you watch how the wave plays out. I'm going to watch the the wave's going to get split. These creeps go here, then they go into the antler, and then so then our whatever our canopy will be safe for a bit. And the important thing to note is that your split is going to have to change throughout the early game. So we start out with like a pretty far split, like we have all of our units back here. Then, like, let's say we go to wave 6, which is probably the first wave where you need to start thinking about changing things, depending on what your ranged unit is, obviously. Where your units can still tank, but let's say I get something like this. Wave 6 is also different because there's only 6 creeps, so the aggro's a bit funky, but you can see if I do something like this, my poor Daphne's getting hit by 3 Roccos. There's no way of killing all of them in time. She's going home, so we don't want that. We have to do lock wave again to show. Okay, so then maybe we need to adjust it. And there's a couple things you can do. One thing is like you can build closer inside the circle, so something like this. If we start, basically all this means is that the split between left and right is about the same, but now you see that the little buzz guy picks up more of the aggro. My Daphne's getting hit by 2 Roccos now instead of 3, which is a lot better. She's a Swift unit, she can actually tank 2. Okay, I'm playing a bit undervalued, so I'm going to leak, obviously, but you can see the split tanking is pretty good. Obviously, between my Wild Shrimp and Antler, I wasn't able to get perfect aggro, but the Wild Shrimp pick up 1 or something, but ends up being okay. And then let's set. So the other thing you can do, if you don't want to build closer, because then maybe you want your Daphne to tank a little bit more on 7, or depending on what unit you have, etc., etc. You can also do something like this, and this spot obviously changes based on the range of this unit, but I think this is pretty good for Daphne, and hopefully we'll see it as well. But you can see that forces a 3-3 split, and my Daphne is still tanking 3 Roccos, but all these left units are now focusing, or at least they were focusing the same Rocco that was hitting the Daphne, so that's a lot better for her. Lets you kill those 3 down, and you can see this is actually like really, really good split tanking. Um, and I'm playing like something like, I don't know, like 70-ish, thinking like 80-ish value under, and I'm able to hold. So that's, or hold pretty good, just like small. So that's not bad. But yeah, so you can play around with this, and then set block wave to be false. Let's go to wave 7. Let's just demonstrate what this might look like on wave 7. It's be a little different, right? This is actually a pretty high split, but since it's wave 6, there's only 6 creeps. Now you can see that way more goes right, but it's not bad because my Daphne's a lot squishy on wave 7. It's barely tanking those like 3 little blobs that can't even go there. So again, we can do stuff to fix this. Things get a little tricky once you have like a melee here. Yeah, you can sell it, obviously. But then you want to like think about, oh, how do I like roughly get the same split? How do I make sure my Daphne doesn't die? And you can do stuff like this. Let's run it again. Yeah, so now my Daphne tanks 1. Yeah, I could probably greed harder. And the amount you need to greed your range units depends. An alive range unit's a lot better than a dead one, for all practicality. Like if you need your range unit to be alive to kill anything on the wave, you probably don't want to greed it too hard. If you're super undervalued, you really need like a insane hold, then maybe you want to greed it way harder. But you can see for my purposes, I don't greed that hard, and my Daphne's still able. I'm still able to hold, so like that's pretty good. Then at this point, then as the game plays on, that just gonna the rest of your build is whatever. You're gonna have to figure that part out yourself. But then let's go back to the early game and let's talk about something like some melee unit splits, because obviously you aren't gonna always be playing with a range unit, but that is it's important to know how to play with melee units as well. I don't know which, because you have some melee units. Well, you can't win them all, but I guess we can talk about some of the units here as well. You want to split with Aqua. It's a shorter range, right? So you probably do something like early game. It's something like this, or you can do like a unit here or unit here, depending on how much you want your Aqua to tank. Then we have Adam. Adam's even shorter range. So the traditional position for Adam is like these 2 guys, and then your first melee unit just goes here. You can go for like the super sick Super Adam on 6 like that. Or you can just do like a normal split like this. And then you build your other melees like, you know, here, here, here. That kind of thing. And you can put melees in the split, obviously, depending on what your build looks like. But let's go back to the main point, which was to show melee splits. So common openers like Windhawk. You know, let's find some other melee units somewhere. Sure, Washroom. And then there are a lot of different spots where you put it. Actually, I kind of want to do... So, like, if you have something like a Warg, like, you can do a pretty traditional split. Like, let's say this is wave 2. And then, if you run this wave, I'm sure you've probably done something similar like this, just 1 straight down. We don't do even split early game, or at least before wave 5, because we don't want to deal with the boss and sell that unit later. So it's not going to be perfect. Looks like my red side's obviously getting a bit more, but obviously that's one way to hold. Show a million different other splits. You can put a melee unit here. I will say that this unit has a tendency to run it down when you split like this on some waves. And as you can see, my Windhawk is tanking like 3 or 4 of those guys, and the Warg is tanking most of them. So even though that these 2 units are the quote-unquote same height, and by height I mean like every square you move to the right, it's half square down equivalent. So like these units are all the same height. So having the same height doesn't necessarily mean you split tank. If you have a unit like this generally leads to cleaner split tanking, for what it's worth. But sometimes you don't want that. Like maybe we have a Windhawk which is doing a lot more damage than a Warg. So we want the Windhawk to be alive or tank less. which is something you can think about as well. In this case, looks like it's about the same as like 5-ish on the Windhawk. Um, yeah, so then let's say your first two melees are here, then your third melee. I mean, generally on wave 3, you probably want to get some better split tanking, so you can go for the guy in the split like we mentioned. My value is kind of low, so I'm just going to build some stuff. So you mentioned, like, we have two units like built like this. They usually split tank okay-ish. Sometimes, obviously, they just don't split tank at all, based on how they run up and hit, but we'll, like, roughly say, like, we want to build some tank value here. This should be, like, a decent split. Obviously, looks like my pack rat just, like, ran it down. My warg is barely tanking anything, but that's okay. That's the way it happens sometimes. We can also do stuff, we can fix stuff like, maybe we had our Windhawk tank really nicely, but it's getting a bit later, like, we don't want our Windhawk tank as much, then maybe we can start building some tanks like here, or here, to make them tankless. Another classic positioning on wave 3 would be something like this. And this is usually done when this unit is very important, but you still want it to tank a bit more. Or you still want to tank a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be blessed, so this unit has chosen to when I was not tanking anything. But usually that gives some sort of split tanking. You can add a send or something, maybe that'll change it. But generally when you want to have like a fatter unit here, yeah, okay. Wave 4, this unit tanks. This guy is chilling in the split. This can also be nice because this unit on the right, like on wave 3, a very common send deal with is DT snail. So like this positioning lets you not have the DT go here, so like both sends go here. So if you have some unit that deals magic damage, you want it to kill everything, you want it to just kill the wave, but still split tank some, you can do something like this. So like you can see it's like tanking a lot, but the DT isn't on it, so like this is an infiltrator or something, probably kill like most of this. So that's something to think about. These are just some ideas though. You probably have to, another important thing I just want to stress again is like you have to try these things out for yourself and figure out what you're comfortable with, and not just try it in sandbox, but like actually play it in game, because things aren't exactly the same between the two. Want some other ideas for positionings, like we can do melees here. Don't really like this one as much. Generally I do like first column, third column, right column, for how my melee builds look like. That's kind of the idea with melee splitting. The next thing I'll talk about is just the concept of even split, upper split, lower split. What do people mean when they say that? They literally talk about the highest unit on your left wall versus the highest unit on your right wall. This is an even split. Why is it important to always have even split? Because if you get sent, let's say, late game, let me find that bad boy. You have Hades, super cool magic damage unit, beast, amazing, and really bad versus Kraken. So let's say we have something like, I'll just simplify it with melee units, but let's say we have this, which that's what we were talking about earlier, or even like this. We get Son of Kraken. Our old friend Kraken is going to walk left, and then our Hades is just perma stuck on hitting at Kraken instead of killing the wave for us, which is what we don't want. So instead, we have even split, something like this. I need to Son of Kraken again. You can see that our Kraken takes a little trip to the split, and then our Hades is able to hit a lot of the wave. Yes, it does hit the Kraken eventually, but that's because I don't have any units on the left. Basically, if you have a weak split, or a split that doesn't do a lot of damage to the Kraken, this is very good, because then the other units on your left side, presumably tanks, melees, whatever, are hitting the wave, so that the other wave creeps are low. If you have any sort of AoE, that also helps, and my Hades can ignore the Kraken for a long time. It's also something to think about when you're sending. If you see someone has, like, I don't know, something that actually deals a lot of damage in the split, would actually make the Kraken low and get focused by the Hades afterwards, then maybe sending Kraken even against even split is pretty good. Um, and this is another reason why you build on the left, because it's easier to control big sense to the right, and generally you want stuff away from your units. So like, imagine I had sign, super east at a Beast Avenger or something, Butcher Avenger, and I put down even split. I get sent a 4-eye. I'm like, oh no, like, can't want the 4-eye off my dude. We just have, if we have even split, the 4-eye is chilling on the right. My guard can tank it for a while. Obviously, yes, my Sov gets focused, but if I have other units over here that run up and are closer than the Sov, then the 4-eye will not target it for a long time. So it's another reason why building on the left generally is better. There are some cases where you do build on the right to begin with. And the most notable guy is just like Zerker Opener. That's like a specific thing with Zerker where you generally want the bigger stuff to go to your Zerker because he's pretty good at killing big things. Dinos, DTs, whatever. Obviously, DTs aren't his specialty, but the classic cases on Wave 3, like a lot of the openers with this bad boy, there's Find One. It's like you don't want ever want your unit hitting the big thing, so you have the Zerker on the right to kill it instead. But that's kind of like a niche case where you might end up building on the right. Generally, most of the time you want to build on the left, make the left side your main side, have the right wall be your split, and generally the stuff I put in my split is not really damage units until very late in the game, and that would only be in specific scenarios. Generally your split is just tanks. Buy time for your main side to kill the left half of the wave. Okay, and then we talked about the advantages of even split. Let's see, what else can we talk about with splitting? There's really not that much more. You can play around stuff to manipulate. You can think about the way sends come out and how to play against that. So something like very common is like, okay, we had that same situation with got our Sovereign here, got a melee unit here. It's like, how do I get a 4-eye on the Sovereign? Well, the problem with our 4-eye was that he was in the middle. He spawns in the middle of the lane in the pack, and then he goes to the right side because it's higher. Okay, so then the solution to that is, what if we could spawn the 4-eye to the left? The easy way to do that is to send 2 of them. But basically, any higher cost merc will do. So, we get double 4-eyed, then one on the left, one on the right. Pretty good. And the way this works is, if I send something like this, the higher cost merc goes to the right to start with. Yep. Then if you want to see another example, it's like, okay, what if I send 3 mercs at different prices? How does that look in the middle? This might be a little funny. You can see when they come out the gate, we have highest cost, second highest cost, so 1, 2, 3. And you can like play around with this. I think it's on the wiki somewhere as well how this works. But this is not true just for range spawns. It's also true for stuff like Mimic, etc., etc. And you can play around with your split because sometimes there will be worlds in which you want a big send to go towards your main side. It's not often, but if you're getting mimicked and you have a way to kill it, or like let's say you're bored, I don't know, it'll have to be something very specific. So you have like this, I don't know. I don't know. Imagine this is your board and you got a mimic on 7, which is the classic, right? You don't, like, there's a world in which, like, okay, if it's not an angler, but let's say, where's a nice little big badger? Okay, let's say for some reason this is your board, somehow, whatever. You don't, normally it's like, okay, even split is always better, because I want to send my big stuff to the right. This is the same height as the Mudman, you can see it like that. So the Mimic will go right. But it's kind of bad because our Badger is actually really tanky against Wave 7, but not very tanky against Mimic. On the other hand, our Mudman is very tanky against a Mimic, so maybe I would rather the Mimic just go here, so I can keep my split like this, and then like let my Badger tank these bad boys, and then have the Mimic chill on here. Maybe I even have some way of killing a Mimic. Obviously not the case for me, um, but yeah, you can see the Badger will stay alive in the split forever. Obviously, Badger might not be the best example because he's maybe too tanky, and you actually want him to pick up a bit more than just those few creeps in the split, but it's ideas like that. That's kind of like the deeper nuances to splitting. Probably for beginner stuff, it's easier to just focus on basic positioning, getting your units to all split tank a little bit in the early game, and trying to get max value out of that. Oops, I guess pause. That's why. So the other thing that's very common for people to talk about or to ask about is one, picking roles, and two, like mastermind selection. It's like if we can talk through all the masterminds and what I think about them. I mean, a lot of them are. Oh, hold on, I need to fix something. Okay. So we have our like basic masterminds, which you see you see 10, you pick 6. So it's like Greed, Lock-in, Fiesta, Casho, Castle, Cartel. And then we have our funny guys, which are like redraw where you get extra rerolls, YOLO where you get one reroll and picked a fully random roll to start, Chaos where you see a random roll every turn. We get talk with these. YOLO, I mean, it's very strong at high elo. 7 income is a lot in the early game, but for new players, I mean, if you want to play it, you can play it. You'll see a lot of units, but you'll have a lot of hard times, most likely, in terms of picking your role. For new players, I probably stick to like the simple ones. If you're really new and you really need to start trying like learn specific openers, you want to play comfortably, like Lock-in is fine. You can play like Lock-in Gun, Lock-in Yuzora, something simple. Or you see the same opener, you see the different paths you can play with it. That's pretty good. But generally, like Greed, Casho, Castle, Cartel, like these are all fairly solid masterminds to play with. You pretty standard Legion gameplay. Obviously, they're all somewhat like at low elos. It doesn't really matter what mastermind you're playing. Like they're probably all good enough. Obviously, at high elo, things start to matter, and then Fiesta, Chaos. I mean, they're all like perfectly fine masterminds to play. Fiesta might warp your perception of how to play the game early, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But again, Legion's about having fun, so if things are fun for you, you should play them. For now, I'm just gonna pick Greed and talk about how to pick a role. There are a couple things to think about picking a role. Generally, the plan for picking a role is one, you need to have a good opener, and when we say good opener, we mean an opener that can be 5 workers on wave 3 and hold 60 preferably. And that is kind of hard to see openers without playing a lot or studying a lot of good players, so it might take some time. The other thing we look for in a role is, besides a good opener, is a good plan. And the plan is literally what it sounds like. You want to have an idea of what you're building for every wave if you need to have an answer for a wave. And the reason why we have answers is because if people try and save and break you on waves, you want to at least have some sort of plan in mind for the waves so you're not just completely screwed. You want to have some ideas of like where you're strong. You can totally find out weak waves if you have a plan for them. Like, let's say like I have a plan where like my build sucks on 9. There's no possible chance for me to hold it. It's like maybe I want to send on wave 8, then get some pressure so that they can't skip wave 8 themselves, stuff like that. But generally, you want to have a plan that can answer every wave. Obviously, not every role is going to be able to do that, but for the most part, they should be able to come up with something. And another thing to think about is your carries for your late game. So what is going to be the defining feature of your role, like doing the most of the damage? Because tanks are kind of like whatever, like you just need the value of stuff to delay for your DPS. But your carries and what kind of build you want to play, the synergies between your units, that's kind of an important thing to think about for the late game. So when I see this role, there's like a lot of different... Okay, another thing to talk about is that people will pick roles differently. This one maybe not so much because it has some very obvious strengths. You can see also like looking at the Legion cells is pretty important. Like if you see something like Magician, maybe you want to rate this Disciple a little bit higher. if you see something like Villain, Pulverizer, maybe you rate like your Nightmare a little higher, stuff like that. For the most part, this opener looks like the carry plan that I see late game is we have Tempest plus Archer and LOD. They cover each other pretty well because we cover the waves out of Arcane Armor with our Archer, and the LD kind of covers the other bad boys like 18, 13, 13 not so much, but we should be okay there with the Hades. It does enough damage. And let's think about the rest of our role. We kind of have one arcane tank, so that's like a must pick. Like if you have one of a certain tank value, you can get away with not having fortified or not having natural. If you have like fortified and swift, you don't need natural. If you have a bunch of natural, maybe you don't need fortified. Obviously, it's nicer because fortified is pretty good on arcane. Waves are a lot better than natural. We only have like one cheapish early game tank. Which that works, so we kind of need to pick it, and we're already at 5 units. We probably want a tier 1, so it's just picking between these two. In terms of our opener, like, the easiest thing to open with is probably Archer in this opener, so you could take the Bony, but I think I would lean towards taking the Seedling, because it gives you options to play around. One, I think Seedling is incredibly strong early game because of its ability, does an insane amount of damage, lets you avoid hitting tanks, lets you snipe damage mark sense, and the Pixie might be useful as some sort of range manage damage early. So I feel like I would lean towards picking this role and maybe like try and get some higher end tank value for my board, because Morg is alright and Garg is alright, but generally we want to see like the big boys, the Badgers, the Bunks, the Uzoras, and whatnot. So that's probably I'd pick this role, and we can pick a few more. Usually I do. Oh, I just hit the reroll button. But like, imagine I did hit this reroll, then maybe I'm thinking about taking the Grawl over the Borg because King Claw is very strong. OT is very strong if we end up on 14, 15, 20. Probably wouldn't take anything else. You could argue for the Blob or the Garg, but I think Blob has a pretty bad weakness to Witch and Needler later, so I think I'd rather have the Fear Devil and myself. Hold on, I need to pick some units, so something like that. Now that I lost the reroll, kind of annoys me, but let's just go pick some more rolls. And your roll depends on what Mastermind take, because with cash out, maybe some openers are stronger. You want to force more aggressive stuff to make up for not having income, etc., etc. But let's just stick to our boy Greed. Always reliable. So we have this roll. Looks a little uncomfortable already. I mean, we have some like pretty strong early games, so I wouldn't say it's like problematic yet. But in terms of what the strongest thing to pick here, basically one other thing you can do is like rule stuff out. So like, let's say I wanted to think about Nightmare. I'm like, well, the first tank I can really build is Antler. So natural fortified early game kind of sucks. And as you notice, the only arcane I have is Peewee, so I probably need to take Peewee. And if I'm not going to play Nightmare, then I want to think about the other Pierce carries I can play, because Pierce is probably the most important damage type. So we want to have some sort of Pierce plan. We can play with the Elite Archer, but again, the Archer really wants tanks, and I don't really have those. Can take the Harpy. Could take the Aqua. All in all, this is a pretty like uncomfortable early game. Like honestly, the strongest opener is probably still Aqua. Could also be Pyro at this point, because the options aren't looking good. But basically, I have to take this Antler. I'm probably leaning towards playing the Aqua and playing the Harpy so that I have some sort of single target. Taking the LD for some late game, and then I guess taking the Zook for some early game. But basically, I probably reroll this on 1 because I really need to find some early game tanks to play around. And in terms of openers, like my plan might change depending on my reroll, but I can either play Pyro, I could play Fire Aqua opening, which would be kind of weird around 6 and 7 when I don't really have tanks to build besides Vet. But yeah, I mean the roll has like some potential late game, but really kind of a mid roll. So let's pick another one. I mean, this roll has some clearer things to think about. A very strong opener in Proton. We have a strong early game with Oathbreaker if we want it. We have Tempest, but not really any synergies besides the Washroom, which isn't that amazing. But in terms of options, we have to pick Washington. We don't have an arcane unit. That's fine. We don't have anything crazy with DK, but might be our best late game. We have yet to see. We can take Angler if we like Angler, but let's see. I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to choose. It's kind of like a dealer's choice on what you want to play with this opener. Like, something like this might be strong because Atoms and Anglers are a good synergy, relatively good synergy, because Anglers kind of don't do anything damage early game, and Atoms do quite a bit, and all they need is tank value, and a bounty and Angler can suffice for that. And then, in terms of late game, we kind of, I don't love taking this Butcher, but it kind of fits our gold. Like, we don't really, he'll be at a good gold threshold, and the synergy with Angler is not that bad in the mid game. And then we kind of want some late game with Pierce. Like, the Angler is okay for that mid game, but something to top it off late game. Don't really have a 15 answer, which is kind of rough. Like, maybe we've seen this CR and need to rethink this last spot. We could take the Seedling as a like Sakura for 15, but it's kind of like a, it's kind of coping that Sakura will be our answer. But something like this. Perhaps then we'll reroll and try and look for some better late game answers that aren't just Pierce. Something for 13, something for 15. But let's pick like one more roll or something. This one we just have in. Well, we have like some of the most broken late game in the roll, so we probably take that. We probably take Beast 4 because that we need to play. All we need is early game. I mean, that's kind of a roll. You can also not play this Harpy, and I think that's totally reasonable to take Gates. That might be stronger even. Other option, too much Pierce. We take the Nightmare. I take the Disciple, but again, that's not really what we want in terms of synergies. Obviously, it's a Magician game, maybe you think differently, but Dancer plus APS is an insane synergy. We have some sort of early game plan. And in terms of plans, I guess I haven't really talked through them with the roll, but with this roll, it's probably something like start Welsh and where I want to put the Sangler, kinda not sure. Like, oops, that's not exactly what I wanted to do. Maybe something like this as the plan for the early game. Get the bounty on 4, maybe get the bounty on 5, the Seraphim to kill 5, we get the Wallachrum out on 6 or 7. Aim to have KP on 8, and then scale into our DK roll. And then, like, you know, our build something. Like, late game will be, you know, scale out and do stuff like this, make some stuff in our split, etc., etc. And that's kind of the plan. Like, maybe Gate will be our answer for 13. For 15, we're kind of doomed, so maybe we need to force 14 with a ridiculously strong 14 board. Something like that. I guess I'll pick another roll since I didn't really talk about the plans with the other roll. Here again, we have some, in terms of late game options, we have this Antler Gate, which is really impressive late game. In terms of early game and how to get there, we have some options. For me, in terms of openers, I'm thinking about the Tree, I'm thinking about the Gate Guard, both of these are solid. In terms of other openers, we have Casket Angler, that's a solid one. But I kind of want to take this Peewee because it's my only tier 1 anyways, and then I don't really want to have double Arcane. So let's say we take these. Then perhaps we want the Angler to get some sort of mid-game power spike. And we take the Peewee for our opener. We probably need the Coiler as a strong 4 answer, but something like this could work. Yeah, I'd say this is probably fine. Again, no clear 15 answer in that role besides the Priestess, and no real way to take Priestess in this role, I feel. So opener is probably something like Gate Guard double Peewee into Coiler, or something like that. Or like Gate Guard double Angler into... The thing about Gate Guard and Angler is kind of weird is that you really don't want your Angler to be DPS, so you probably build something more like this, have your bounties tank a bit more, get your bounty, get your Harv in like 6 or 7 or whenever, and then, you know, eventually scale out and start doing stuff like this, right? And that's kind of the plan in terms of like answers for each of the early game waves. I mean, we've talked about the early game plan. The coiler is an answer for 4. In terms of 5, you have probably the answer is just having fortified units. Maybe if we get straight 5, we can maybe get out the Harb instead of a bounty. The Harb could be a 6 answer, this can be a 6 answer, this can be a 7 answer, an 8 answer, or the Kingpin can be our 8 answer. So we have a lot of options with this role. We can get out some veterans as tank value for 7. Well, you know, for some reason we're really sure it's 3, we're getting like a huge send. Maybe we have a veteran on 3 instead of a coiler. Basically, this role has options, and then maybe in your reroll, what are you looking for? You can ditch this, you can ditch this. You could maybe even ditch the Serpent if you find some better late game. You can ditch this for a better late game tank, and maybe just keep the Angler as your tier 1 split fixer. Yeah, hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to pick a role. Picking a role is one of the hardest things in this game, though, and people make mistakes, including me, like all the time still. Um, and it's something like even the best players will disagree about what was the right thing to take in a role. So it's something you need to work on over time, and something you will get better at if you keep practicing at doing it and trying to see how to keep at it. That's kind of all the basic stuff I talk about that's applicable to basically everyone. It's harder to talk about macro without specific examples, and it's often not practical for lower elo players to talk about macro because their games look very, very different than at the high end. But yeah, if you want to look at how good players build, you should go through players' match histories, good players' match histories, and kind of just people's builds roughly look the same at high elo. We can take a look at some of my builds from my last game or something. I don't think this game was like very good for me or anything, but let's see. Like I have an opener. Check out my role has a plan for most of the waves. I kind of troll this game and don't get out my planned 8 answer, which is the Fire Lord, because I had some reason in my head that I needed a 10 answer in the big Halo, but my early game is Cascade Atom. I had planned to have the Gate Guard, the Harb as a potential 6 answer. And yeah, I mess up here. I like leaked the income because like I don't know, I got stuck in my reroll thinking about some stuff, but whatever. You can see I don't have a split early game necessarily, like the traditional one, but with Atom, these Atoms tank really well. The Gate Guard maybe picks up like a little bit on the left, and the reason I don't have a split is because I have an AoE unit like Cage of Pain that I really want to hit the majority of the way with. You can have a weak split with it, as you see, I can add on wave 8. I have a split now, and I'm still trying to get a little bit value of my range units tanking. You can see I'm adding to my split slowly, but that's just kind of generic tank value, alpha male, and then you can see the majority of my units are built on the left. Blah blah, we win the game. Go do another build, see how I build. This one's a little different. I have a dwarf, but so you can see the same principle. I have a range split here. Then I add a little melee split here, get a little unlucky, get tryharded, whatever. I try to have my range units split tank a little bit by building them a little off. Obviously not the case because my range is longer range. I didn't really think about that. But yeah, you can see like again, I don't even have like that strong of a split, and the idea is like my Neko probably tanks the most, but my bounty should pick up some of the left, and my Neko will pick up the split. But as the game progresses, you can see that I do end up building more in the split, but really not that much, and mostly just tanks in the split. Another thing people like to do is drag range in the split. We can look at Genome's build here. He also only has like shooters in the split with some royal guards. But that's like the more you look at how top players build, the better idea you have of how they do it. I mean, this is Mass, a very specific opener, so the build pretty much looks the same between most people's games. But yeah, I basically only have shooters in the split. I took those range units, drag the mobs even more. We saw the mobs go to the left, so the mobs go to this mass, then they have to walk down to this mass, and then they can join the fight. And the same thing, I don't really have that strong of a split, because again, I have caskets that I want to prioritize. Might be worth actually having a stronger split here, but yeah, oh well. Anyways, hope that helps, and again, I do free coaching. You can DM me on Discord for it. We can try and set up some time. It'll probably be easier if you're from NA, but I can also coach EU players, no problem. Yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.